Okay, we're going to make another quick little video. And I've already shot this video several times, but thank you to a phone update. That phone update corrupted my memory card, and I lost the video before I can get it uploaded. So, yeah, and I'm making this video like it's 2009, and I'm using my cell phone as a camera, but I don't know. I think the camera does good enough. My lighting's a bigger issue here, I think. But anyways, more to the story. So this is a Lightning OTF, and it's maybe about 5 or 6 weeks old, if I had to guess. And basically it's broken, and I broke it. I was able to fix it. It broke in a very similar way, but in a different area of the knife. I tried to fix it, and I ended up making other things worse. And so this video is really more to discuss a weakness that I found in this knife that I've not heard anyone talk about in any of the videos on YouTube that I've watched. So anyways, I was pretty proud of my solution I come up with, and it works on the front of the knife, but it doesn't work in the back. So essentially what you have here is you have this, sometime maybe I should make a video detailing how these things work. I keep holding off because I keep learning little teeny tiny bits and pieces of details that help me understand basically the tolerances in here, so I keep holding off. I mean, I've got the theory of operation down, but anyways, more to the point, there's these springs and these hook mechanisms, and they basically sit on this slide. So you have one at the front, and then you have another one at the back. The hook in the back is a little taller than the hook in the front. I suppose I could kind of put it back together in a way. It's not going to be pretty. But essentially you should have two springs. My other spring is laying right here. Okay, so there's the spring is definitely screwed up. That's the part that I made worse. I was trying to use heat to work the metal hooks to change their shape a little bit, and I'll share why. So essentially what happens, now I know I got the springs not routed correctly. I've got it on the top over here and the bottom over here. But essentially what happens is that button basically is attached to this slide mechanism, right? And you could see the slide mechanism, you could see these locks. Maybe I will show quickly how these locks work. So the knife is fully out, and normally we have a little spring tension. The front hook hooks the front of this wheel, this circular piece here, and that's what pulls it tight against the lock, keeping it from being sloppy. And then as you move the slide back, as you pull the switch back, basically that hook is hooked back here, and then using spring tension all the way across, it hooks this piece, and you build this tension, and that tension builds against this blade, and then there's a piece right in here that catches and releases that lock. You can't see that one because it's behind the plates, but essentially it does the same thing as the back lock. I can show you the back lock, that's a little easier. it basically does the same thing on the front. You can see how that, when that slides over, that lock, that's what keeps the blade into position. And if I was to show you what's going on there, the blade is hitting that piece of metal. You can see that in there, maybe a little bit. See if I can turn the light on. You could see here's the lock mechanism. It's basically in the path of the blade, the back of the blade. And the blade wants to pass through it, but the lock says, nope, you're not going anywhere. That's as far as you go. But that switch depresses that, presses that, and then all that spring energy all at once acts on the blade, and it snaps it back all the way back here into the closed position. And now there's another hook. There's a hook in the front, and then there's a hook in the back. So imagine that there's a hook back here. The hook back here on the back actually grabs the back of the blade. It actually grabs the blade right down in there. And I think that that's why the hook is a little taller on the back than it is on... Great, I just dropped it. Here it is. So the hook on the back is taller than the hook on the front. The hook on the front needs to be short enough to allow for the blade to pass through, but long enough to catch just this. Because if it caught anywhere else but here, then it would drag across this blade as the blade was being deployed. I'm not explaining this well because I don't have the parts here to kind of show you. Well, I don't have working parts because they're in pieces. So essentially what happens when this is my theory, that the hooks break. And what I was able to do on the front hook was it was a clean break. It bends the hook out just a little bit. And that's how I noticed I had a problem, is that it was cracked to the metal, and then it allowed for it to just maybe be more at a 45 instead of a 90. And what that did is it gave like an extra millimeter of slop between the hook and this circular piece, so it wasn't pulling it tight, so it was sloppy. I wiggled around the knife around, and I can hear it sound like this, because the hook wasn't tight because it was misshapen. And when I bent it back, put it back together, and it was fine until about the third open-close deploy, and then it bent again. And so I bent it back, and then it lasted one deployment, and then I took my basically I took these guys and I put it in my pliers, and then I just broke it off completely. And then I'm like, oh great, what am I gonna do? And I looked and thought, and can I fabricate something? That's why I've got so many weird shop-like tools around here. Of course, I just dropped one of the hooks. That's awesome. Let me pause this video for a second. Okay, I'm back. So essentially what I did was that I flattened that portion of the hook out, cut it off, flattened it, and then re-bent it. So I essentially shortened it. I shortened the front hook, and it was good. It worked great. I had to fine tune it. I had to get it just right, and I got my little vise out and some files and things like that. And I was using a hammer, and I was pounding this into shape, and I think it turned out pretty good. It's not perfectly flat. It's got a little curve to it, but it works. So I was pretty happy, and I made a video of that. It took me like an hour and a half, but I did it. I was pretty proud of myself. And then like a week later, I noticed my slop was back. I'm like, what is going on? But here's the thing. Now it's sloppy in the handle. So I'm like, I'll bet you the other hook's now worn out. And sure enough, same thing. I bent it back, and well, to be honest with you, I Googled how to work with metal. That's why the torch is sitting there. And I did not learn much, and I did not do it right, and that's where I made things worse. I applied heat to the spring, and it screwed the springs up. It put weird twists in them and made them misshapen. And so, yeah, I filled my sink up with water, and I heated it up, and I bent it. And then I quickly put it in the cold water and rinse and repeat it over and over and over, thinking that I was doing the right thing and I was making the steel harder, et cetera, et cetera. And it eventually just cracked and fell off. So I did the same thing. I shortened the hook, and I shaped this. It's not quite correct. It should be at 90 degrees, and it should be completely flat over here and completely flat over there. But this was working until I pieced it all back together, and then I learned that the springs were now in the way. We have a channel for the springs. Basically, the springs were allowed to exist in this channel right here where I've got lithium grease. And essentially what was happening is since I shortened it, basically the hook was originally something like right there. And since I shortened it, now it's back here. Now, I probably am not saying that correctly, because back here is where the hook has always wanted to be. But because I've shortened it, the holes have now traveled this way to make up for the difference. And that drags the springs into this, and there's no groove for the springs back here. I thought, you know what? I could probably grind that down and make room for the springs. But then I stopped. Like, nope, I'm going to figure something else out. I'm going to get new springs and a new hook and new hooks, and we'll see. Did I happen to get a bad set of hooks? I really don't know. It feels like they broke awfully quick. And this stuff broke in, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 weeks that it broke. Maybe 5 weeks it broke. 4 or 5 weeks. And the back hook broke about a week after the front hook broke. And I don't know if it's because the tension, basically when we pull the blade, when we want the blade out, the front hook and slide comes out, and the back hook stays building spring tension. And then eventually the back lock is disengaged. And then all at once, the blade flies out. But just before it locks into position, it smacks into that the front hook and applies just a tiny amount of pressure, so that there's a tiny bit of spring tension, and that keeps the knife from being sloppy. And basically, now this hook is up against the slide. And it's the same thing when we come back, we push the button back, the whole slide pushes this way. This hook comes building spring tension. And then all of a sudden, the front lock is disengaged, and then this hook is allowed to slam the blade back. So I don't know if it's the slamming, or if it's the pressure, or if it's from the blade smacking from one end to the other on the final deployment or retraction of the blade. I'm not sure what's causing the fault here. Maybe it's cheap metal that can't stand either one. I kind of feel like it's the slapping of the blade violently, or the blade stops, or the back of the blade into the metal pieces that's causing the issue, rather than the tension from going back and forth. I could be wrong. I don't know. So anyways, that's what I wanted to talk about. I've heard where guys have had this knife for years and not have problems. And I don't know, ever since I first got into knives, even if it was just a folder, I was constantly flipping it and closing it and, just messing around, seeing how quick I can open and close the knife. I've always done that with things. I mean, if it's a Zippo lighter or whatever, if it clicks and makes noises and moves, I'm going to play with it. And I might play with it until it breaks, and I'll learn something along the way, and that's essentially what happened here. So I could tell you that I've played with this knife quite a bit, and it hasn't done that, but it could be that it's because we got a lighter blade. There's a lot less metal slapping around in there, but I feel like the spring tension's about the same. I don't know. I guess time will tell. A friend of mine is supposed to give me his OTF that's broken, and he has an atomic something. I forget which model it is. I bet you it has the same parts. I bet it has the same springs and the same hooks. I mean, I don't know for sure. I guess I'm kind of tempted to see if this is the same. Maybe I can open this up and see if this is the same. Oh yeah, there's one of the pieces from the back hook. When the back hook broke, I saved it. There it is. So before I take these knives apart, I've heard some people say that parts go flying, stuff goes everywhere. No, but what I will do is I take the tension off the lock, so the knife is free floating. The only thing that might flip out a little bit is the switch might get misaligned with this sled piece. The sled is counting on being sandwiched between the top and bottom of the handle. If you take that away, it can bind up, but it's not. It just depends on how everything's sitting in there. I don't think it's a super big deal. So that's what I do. I just take the tension off the slide by putting the blade in a non-locked position. So there's that. Here's the button for this piece, or that knife. I wonder if it's the same. Nope, smaller. What about the hooks? What about the length? The length is the same. The hooks fit perfectly into the grooves. It's the same parts. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't seem like. It seems like all these are made in the same place, which is fine, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm gonna just go ahead and piece this together here, and you want to apply a little bit of pressure on that switch, make sure it's in there correctly into its groove, and then we're going to yep, there we are. So same thing, I'm going to disable the lock, pull this back out, pull this back out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the one knife back together. You'll see that everything is all greased up. There's a few points of contact that I felt like could use a little bit of lubricant on this sled. But the main reason why I got grease everywhere is to dampen the noise of the spring. I packed the spring full of grease just so it doesn't make that twangy sound. I can't stand that twangy sound. And not only would I hear it, but I could feel it. Bad thing is now I got grease all over. Every time I take these apart, damn it. Every time I take them apart, I end up with grease all over the place. So we're gonna set that right there. Put this piece back on here. Make sure it's lined up. Looks like it is. Okay, and we're gonna put it back together. So that's kind of good to know. That means that my friend's knife, my friend's OTF, most likely has the same parts, the same hook and springs. That's all I really need to get my knife back up and going. I'm going to hold this more over the table. These screws are kind of small. If I drop them like I just did right there, and I'm trying to do this through the camera, it's not going well. Wrong driver. I also highly recommend Loctite. Loctite on the threads of these guys. There's a lot of shock taking place with that knife blade flipping in and out. So that's good to know. Now, maybe I can find parts. I mean, my friend lives like gosh, that's probably about an hour drive, 50 minutes anyways. And it'll be rude if I don't hang out. So we're probably looking at all night just to get my springs and stuff for the broken knife, springs and hooks. So I might just order that online. So, yep, we're good to go. Go ahead and tighten these down just a little bit more. Okay, good to know. I will fix this eventually. So, in a nutshell, I found a weakness. Maybe there was a bad batch of knives, or maybe the hooks, they're just made out of crappy material and they will fail. Again, I don't know a whole lot about metal, but clearly that's a weak spot. So I cannot wait to get the new parts. In fact, now that I know that they're a little more universal, I might go wash up and go look right now for OTF hooks and springs. So I guess that's all I got for now, and there'll probably be another follow-up video once I get it done.